Assalamu alaikum students. This is Dr. Samina Qasim, your Human Resource Management course facilitator. Today, I'm going to discuss performance management and appraisal. After employees have been on the job for some time, you should appraise their performance. The purpose of this chapter is to show how you can do that. Now let's start the chapter. What is performance appraisal? Every manager needs some way to appraise employees' performance. If employees' performance is good, you'll want to reinforce it. And if it's bad, you'll want to take corrective action. Performance appraisal is actually evaluating an employee's current or past performance relative to his or her performance standards. There are basically three steps of performance appraisal process. First is setting standards. It shows the pre-established standards for actual assessment. Second is actual assessment, in which the process is of assessing employees' performance. Third is feedback to employees, in which you provide feedback to employees about their performance outcome. Why appraisal? Because it is the basis for pay and promotion decision. Secondly, it plays an integral role in performance management. Appraisal plays a central role in employers' performance management process because performance management means continuously making sure that each employee and team performance makes sense in terms of the company's overall goal. Third, it helps in correcting deficiency and reinforcing good performance. Appraisal lets you and subordinate develop a plan for correcting any deficiency and to reinforce the things that subordinates does right. Fourth, it is useful in career planning. Because appraisal should facilitate career planning, it provides an opportunity to review the employee's career plan in light of his or her exhibited strengths and weaknesses. Finally, supervisor use appraisal to identify employees' training and development needs. The appraisal should enable the supervisor to identify if there is a performance gap between employees' performance and his or her standards. And it should also help to identify the cause of any such gap and the remedial steps required. Performance goals should be SMART. S for specific, that is clearly state the desired results. Measurable, in answering how much. Attainable, that means not too tough, nor too easy. Then realistic, to what's to be achieved. Timely, in reflecting the deadlines and milestones. Now, the basic concept in performance management and performance appraisal. Performance appraisal is actually setting work standards, assessing performance, and providing feedback to employees to motivate, correct, and continue their performance. However, performance management is an integrated approach to ensuring that an employee's performance supports and contributes to the organization's strategic aims. Now, the performance appraisal techniques. First is this graphic rating scale. It is the most popular and simplest one. In this, you list different job traits, characteristics, and set performance values to rate those traits. During the performance appraisal process, supervisor or the manager rate particular job traits called competency, teamwork, and communication by circling the score. Finally, the overall rating identifies an employee's performance with respect to job characteristics. You see, this is an example of graphic rating scale. Second is management by objective. This is a multi-step process to define smart organizationally relevant goals or objective with each employee and then rate employees' progress against these goals. MBO step includes set organizational goals, set departmental goals, communicate departmental goals, set individual employees' goals or employees' expectations, conduct performance appraisal process, discuss outcomes, that is the feedback with employees. Some employers use management by objective as primary appraisal method. Others use it to supplement a graphic rating or other appraisal method. You could engage in an informal MBO program with subordinate by jointly setting goals and periodically providing feedback. However, MBO generally refers to a comprehensive formal organization-wide goal setting and appraisal program. Here goals cascade down by level and department, from company-wide strategic goals to tactical day-to-day goals. Third is ordination ranking method. In this, ranking employees from best to worst based on certain traits. Steps include enlist all employees, rank employees highest on performance at the top. Over here, you can see my cursor moving. Rank employee highest on performance at the top, rank employee lowest on performing and put at the lowest over here with the poor performance. Then again next highest, then lowest, highest and lowest, and so on until all the names are on the scale. Clear? Force distribution method. In this method, an employee rated against predetermined percentages of performance rates. It reflects the fact that top employees often outperform average or poor ones by as much as 100%. For example, General Electric used top 20%, middle 70%, and bottom 10% for its managers, and most of the bottom 10% lost their jobs. Different organizations use different percentages for appraisal. Critical incident. Critical incident. With the critical incident method, the supervisor keeps a log of positive and negative examples. Here, keeping a record of uncommonly good and undesirable examples of an employee work-related behavior and reviewing it with the employee at predetermined times. Basically, in this, every 6 months or so, supervisor and subordinate need to discuss the later performances. Using the incident as example, compiling incident is useful. It provides example of good and poor performance the supervisor can use to explain the person rating. It makes the supervisor think about the subordinate's appraisal all during the year. So the rating does not just reflect the employee's most recent performance. And the list provides examples of how the subordinates can eliminate deficiencies. The downside is that without some numerical rating, this method is not as useful for comparing employees as for salary decisions. Next is behaviorally anchored rating scale. A behaviorally anchored rating scale is an appraisal tool that anchors a numerical rating scale with specific illustrative examples of good or poor performance. It involves the following 5 steps. First is write critical incident. In this, you ask the job holder or supervisor to write specific illustration, which is the critical incident of effective and ineffective performance on the job. Next, you develop performance dimension. That is, have these people group the incident into 5 or 10 performance dimensions, such as salesmanship skills. Third, reallocate incidents. That is, to verify these groups, have another team of people who also know the job reallocate the original critical incident. They must reassign each incident to the cluster they think it fits best. Retain a critical incident if most of the second team assigned to it the same cluster as did the first group. Next, scale the incident. This second group then rates the behavior described by the incident as to how effectively or ineffectively it represents performance on the dimension. Like for example, 7 to 9 point scales are typically used. Last is develop a final instrument. Choose about 6 or 7 of the incident as the dimension's behavioral anchor. I hope this is clear to you all. Now, dealing with the rater's error. This is very important. Potential rating problem include unclear standards. Standards should be clear, otherwise it would probably result in unfair appraisal because the traits and degrees of merit are ambiguous. For example, different supervisor might define good performance, fair performance, and so on differently. The best way to fix this problem is to include descriptive phrase that define or illustrate each trait. Second is halo effect. It is the influence of a rater's general impression on rating of specific rating qualities. Experts define halo effect as the influence of a rater's general impression on rating of specific rating qualities. For example, supervisors often rate unfriendly employees lower on all traits rather than just on getting along well with others. Being aware of this problem is a step towards avoiding it. Supervisory training can also alleviate the problem. Central tendency. In this, they rate every employee on average. Some supervisors stick to the middle when filling in rating scales. For example, if the rating scale ranges from 1 to 7, they tend to avoid the high, like for example 6 and 7, and low, for example 1 and 2, and rate most of the people between 3 and 5. Central tendency means rating all employees on average. Doing so distorts the evaluation, making them less useful for promotion, salary, or counseling purposes. Ranking employees instead of using graphic rating scales can reduce this problem. Since ranking means you can't rate all of them on average. Clear? Now next is leniency or strictness. Here they rate employees either high or low. Some appraisers, they aren't lenient, they're very lenient and score everyone as above average. While others are very strict, they might score everyone as average, while still there are others that might tend to score everyone as below average. More than likely, you can say that there should be a range of evaluation where there are some standouts, some poor performance, some average performance as well. And if you all you can say appraisals are coming out the same. Make sure that you are giving the full range of performance measure adequate consideration. Then it is recency effects. Recent event bias, the rater's perception. This is another common error in which appraisers focus in only a short period of time right before an appraisal takes place. If performance appraisal happens once or twice a year at your organization, it's important to remember that you are evaluating performance over the entire period, not just a small part of it. Otherwise, you are not being fair to someone who has done a great job but only recently begun to falter. or vice versa. Avoiding this error entails having a good process in place to capture performance information throughout the period being reviewed. Last is the bias. We all have biases, whether they come out as a general positive or negative feeling about someone or something. The trick, of course, is not to let those biases cloud your approach to the performance appraisal process. Remind yourself that you are trying to be as objective as possible about reviewing an employee's performance, and your biases can steer the process into a highly subjective direction. They can also make your appraisal effort inconsistent across different subjective directions. They can also make your appraisal effort inconsistent across different employees, and being consistent is the only key feature of a process that is fair. Just because you are not like a person does not mean the evaluation of their performance must reflect that. Keep it as objective as possible. Okay, now next is this is the checklist of best practices for administering fair performance appraisal. Now, managing the appraisal interview. An interview in which the supervisor and subordinate review the appraisal and make plans to remedy deficiency and reinforce the strengths. There are basically four types of situation during the interview. First is satisfactory, promotable. That says the person performance is satisfactory and there is a promotion ahead. Your objective is to discuss the person career plans and to develop a specific professional development plan. Second is satisfactory but not promotable. That is that employee is not promotable whose performance is satisfactory but for whom promotion is not possible. The objective here is to maintain satisfactory performance. The best option is usually to find incentives that are important to the person and sufficient to maintain performance. These might include extra time off, a small bonus, and a reinforcement, perhaps in the form of an occasional well done. Third is unsatisfactory but correctable. Here, when the person performance is unsatisfactory but correctable, the interview objective is to lay out an action plan for correcting the unsatisfactory performance. Now, finally, if the employee is unsatisfactory and the situation is uncorrectable, you can usually skip the interview. You either tolerate the person's poor performance for now or more likely dismiss the person. Here, next, guidelines to conduct appraisal interviews. Now, set a time for the interview and allow enough time. Interviews with the low-level personnel like clerical staff or the clerical workers should take no more than an hour. However, interviews with the management employees often take 2 to 3 hours. Conduct the interview in a private place with no interruptions. There are four things to keep in mind when conducting the interview. First is talk in terms of objective work data. Use examples such as absence, tardiness, quality records, orders processed, productivity records, and so on. Don't get personal. Don't say that you are too slow in producing those reports. Instead, try to compare the person performance to a standard. These reports should normally be done within 10 days. Similarly, don't compare the person performance to that of other person. he's quicker than you, he's far better than you, things like that. Encourage the person to talk. Stop and listen to what the person is saying. Ask open ended questions such as, what do you think we can do to improve the situation? Use a command such as, go on. Restate the person's last point as a question, such as, you don't think you can get the job done? Next is get agreement. Make sure the person leaves knowing specifically what he or she is doing right or doing wrong, and with agreement on how things will be improved and when they will complete that task. Write an action plan with targets and dates. This will be very helpful. I hope this lecture is clear to you all. If you have any query, you can email me. Thank you so much.